There's been a robbery, and you are all members of the jury. Everything I say now are undisputed facts of the case. A woman was robbed at knife point in Liverpool Street. A man took her purse. The police arrived to search for the man. They searched down an alleyway off Liverpool Street, and they found a homeless man. In looking for the homeless man, they searched him, and they found a knife on the homeless man. Obviously, the homeless man was then arrested, and then forensics arrived. And they searched the bin next to the homeless man. And they found the woman's purse. Analysis of the woman's purse showed that it had the homeless man's fingerprints on them. Now, as members of the jury, you will have to decide whether the homeless man is guilty or not. Now, I'm sure you've all seen the title of my talk, so there are no prizes for guessing what's coming next. But what if I told you that there were several witnesses that said that the homeless man had always lived in that area, so there were no surprises seeing him there? What if I told you that, along with the knife, the police also found a fork and a spoon? He needed these to eat. What if I told you that the homeless man was always looking around bins in this area, and if his fingerprints were on the purse, it was just that he was searching through the bin to look for food? Now, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? Well, your brain probably did exactly what mine did when it first heard this case. It made assumptions based on unconscious bias. When I heard knife in the street, I immediately thought it was malicious because of what I've heard in the news, for example. Unconscious bias can be really good for making quick, instinctive decisions, but it can lead to incorrect judgments based on incomplete facts. And this is the behavior that I'd like to talk to you about today: your unconscious bias and how you can overcome it. So the inspiration behind my talk stems from my career. I'm a paralegal. I work for an intellectual property firm, and I've completed the bar course, and I intend to become a barrister. Now, understanding unconscious bias is crucial in the legal industry. If you are a solicitor, barrister, or judge, you have to judge things solely on the facts of the case, and you can't allow unconscious bias to creep in. I myself have done several unconscious bias training programs to better understand my unconscious bias and how I can overcome it. Now, so when a solicitor, barrister, or judge hears the word knife, they don't make assumptions about that knife. They ask, what kind of knife? So hopefully, in my talk, I'm going to give you all a better understanding of your unconscious bias. Now, it is my belief that this unconscious bias causes much of the division that we see in society, and I will try to demonstrate that. And hopefully, in my talk, I can begin to heal this divide and give you all a better understanding of your unconscious bias. So firstly, what unconscious biases do we have? Well, there's gambler's fallacy. Do we have any gamblers in today? Anyone like a cheeky accumulator at the weekend? Yeah, a few of you. I do as well. And those that don't probably will have experienced this as well. Gambler's fallacy is the wrongful belief that when you're on a losing streak, you're more likely to win next. So it's like when you're flipping a coin. You flip it and it comes up heads, and then heads again, and then heads again, heads again, and you think, okay, it has to be tails next. It's been heads 4 times in a row. Even though deep down you know it's 50-50%, you still feel like, okay, it's going to have to be tails next. That's gambler's fallacy. We also have beauty bias. So beauty bias is the favorable treatment towards those that are more attractive. Now I see some people on the back row there doing a little fist pump, thinking, right, that's them sorted for the future. But unfortunately not. You actually have negative beauty bias as well, which is that those that are really attractive can actually be seen as less intelligent. But that is the beauty bias that we have. But the two that I would like to focus on, and the two that I think are causing the most difficulties in society, are conformity bias and confirmation bias. So conformity bias is the tendency to behave like the people around us. Now this is driven by a desire to fit in or be normal. It was tested by a man named Solomon Asch in 1951, and he devised the Asch line test. Now, this test was quite simple. He got 8 participants to sit in a room and look at lines, and all they had to do was assess which line matched the 3 lines, A, B, or C. And as you can clearly see, that is line C that matches the target line. But Solomon had a trick up his sleeve. What Solomon did is he had stooges on his side. He'd hired 7 actors to play 8 of the participants, so there was actually 1 person that was taking part in the test. Now, for the first 2 rounds of the test, what he did was he got the actors to give the obvious correct answer. But for the 3rd round of the test, he told all of the actors to give the same wrong answer. Now, when it finally came down to the actual participant, would they conform to the wrong answer, despite it being clearly wrong, or would they give the obvious correct answer? Now, before I tell you the result, I should say that in the control test, when there was no pressure, there was less than 1% error in the actual participant. But in the Asch line test, there was 32% of people that actually conformed to the obvious wrong answer. Now, this clearly shows that this has a big impact on our society and the decisions that we make. The second one is confirmation bias. Now, confirmation bias is a tendency for us to put more weight to arguments that are in favor of our beliefs and to reject those that are against our beliefs. So this was tested in Stanford University. And they got 2 groups, one group that was in favor of the death penalty and one group that was against the death penalty. And they gave both these groups 2 studies. One talked about why the death penalty was good, another one talked about why the death penalty was bad. They allowed these 2 groups to digest these studies, and after they had digested them, they asked them again, what do you think about the death penalty? And both of the groups were more in favor of their original decision, despite being given equally weighted arguments on each side. Now, this clearly shows that they were putting more weight to the argument that was in favor of their beliefs and ignoring that was against their beliefs. Now, this happens all the time in society. So I'm a Reading fan. Kind of hope for a whoop whoop out there somewhere. That's fine. And I'm constantly searching through social media or sports magazines to try and find something positive to say about Reading. It's quite difficult. And I'll find someone or an article that will say, yes, Reading are going to get promoted this season. And I think, yes, okay, I'll hang on, maybe we actually have a chance. And I will completely ignore the 100 other people that said we'll get relegated. That is confirmation bias. So I've described what these 2 biases are, but why do they cause this difficulty in society, and why do they cause this division that I've talked about? Well, this is demonstrated in this diagram that I have. Essentially, the answer is that it causes 2 poles and 2 extreme poles of view. So what conformity bias does is it makes people act like the people around them. So as you see, the colors are beginning to change. People are starting to conform around the people that are close to them. So you see some people turning to orange, people turning to blue. So those represent 2 different sides of a debate. What we end up with is 2 separate sides. One side are on the orange side, another side are on the blue side. Now, that's fine. But when we throw confirmation bias in, it separates these groups out. And they become more hardened in their views. Now, this is, in my belief, what has caused a lot of animosity when it comes to debates in the UK. We get 2 sides to a debate that are stuck on their sides of view and find it really hard to communicate with each other and actually have open, honest debates and talk about things. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that social media makes this much, much worse. Now, what social media has the power to do is actually show you information that is only aligned to your beliefs. They can cut out opposing views and actually form a bubble around these 2 groups. So they're never challenged in their views. They're stuck in this echo chamber of belief, and they can't get out. So that's a difficulty, and that's why I think we've seen this animosity with debates like Brexit, for example, where we have 2 sides to a debate that find it really hard to sort of communicate. And there's animosity there, essentially. What can we do about it? How can we solve this issue? We're stuck in this situation. Firstly, before I go into sort of the details, I should say there's no one's fault that we find ourselves in this situation. We developed unconscious bias for evolutionary purposes, and that was because there were lots of unknowns. So if we were in tribal times, for example, there we go, there's a little diagram of tribal times, and I was a tribesperson, and I saw a red snake coming towards me. I might think, so my friend died from a red snake, so I'm going to run away, right? So they're making an unconscious, well, maybe that's conscious, but they're making a judgment about the snake without actually understanding it. Now, that snake might have been harmless, it might have been fine, but because of previous experiences with red snakes, they run away. But in today's society, we don't have many of these unknowns, or as much of these unknowns, and we have much more time to make our decisions. But this unconscious bias behavior has stayed with us. So we've got to learn a way to combat it. But the important thing to take away from this point is that it's a personal issue. This is something that is within each individual, so the solution has to come from each individual as well. Okay, so something that I've learned through my legal studies and something through my unconscious bias training to combat unconscious bias is to give yourself a moment to reflect. When we hear a fact or a bit of evidence, we can be very tempted to suddenly make an instant decision about it, suddenly tweet about it, or suddenly sort of have an opinion. But a moment of reflection can really allow you to take a step back and assess things solely on the facts. Now, a little game I like to play is a little word association to give yourself a sort of better understanding of what your unconscious bias might be. This is the animal edition, dog and shark. Okay, so what are my initial reactions to these two animals? We have dog. Dog, really friendly, love dogs, really playful, really fun. Everyone likes dogs at the moment. Sharks, scary, jaws, going to eat me, don't want to swim, those kind of things. And so those are my initial reactions to those two words, those two animals. If we take a step back and reflect, maybe look at some of the facts, if you look at a fact from Statista, 2018, dogs kill 35,000 people a year and sharks kill 6. Now, that might not be showing, my initial reaction might not be showing the full story here. Clearly not in that statistics. Now, I know there are other factors, like the number of animals, for example, but this clearly shows that my initial reaction might not be showing the full story. And this moment of reflection can really open up your mind and really assess what you're actually looking at and what facts or evidence you are assessing. The next thing is education. To better understand what unconscious biases you have. So I've only scratched the surface on the number of unconscious biases we have. You can read up and have a look at all the different kinds of unconscious biases. We have loads. But understanding them and giving yourself a better understanding of what unconscious biases you have can allow you to better combat them when you might be using them in a certain situation. As you can see from my slide, the next one is experiencing different cultures, and that's the final bit of advice. Now, when I say experiencing different cultures, I don't mean fly over to Thailand and play with elephants for a bit. I mean really get to know people with different points of view and different ways of thinking. Now, this could be your neighbor, it could be your postman. Just go and listen to them and don't make an immediate opinion about what they believe. Really take in their belief and really open your mind to what they're thinking and how they think what they're thinking. And it can begin to combat these echo chambers we have, because you're allowing someone with a different point of view to break that chamber and sort of come in to the extreme pole of view and start to break it down. So that's really important. I think you'll find you can actually learn a lot from other people when you learn and listen to their points of view. So to conclude, what I wanted to do today was to give you all a better understanding of your unconscious bias and to begin to break down this division that I see. I've talked about how conformity bias and confirmation bias in combination can cause this diverging poles of view. And I've talked about how reflection and giving yourself a better understanding of your unconscious biases, as well as viewing different cultures and experiencing different points of view, can begin to break this down. Now, as this is a personal issue, we all have to spread this message. We need to tell more people about this so people can start to break down these two extreme poles of view. So I'll pass it on to you to start implementing these changes and spreading the message. Ask yourself, did you view something objectively? Ask yourself, did you give yourself a moment of reflection? Ask yourself, are you biased? Thank you.